Our recent documentary, Nation of Lies, exposed the multitude of lies we are told by the government, big business, and the media. By controlling the press and broadcasting high-tech propaganda instead of the truth, the global elite have kept the American people in a constant state of disinformation and confusion for decades. Now we're going to take a look at one of the most catastrophic and devastating results of these lies: division. By keeping the American people in a constant state of apprehension and replacing our once free press with propaganda, the elite have succeeded in dividing this nation along the lines of gender, race, religion, sexuality, and political ideology. Because Americans have become so immersed in issues like immigration and gay marriage, they have been completely distracted from the real challenges America faces. This mass distraction has given the global elite the opportunity to set up an Orwellian police state society where your every move is tracked, traced, and databased. As they have gained control of our government, the elite have also looted America's wealth and committed it to wars of conquest all over the world. Yeah! Yeah! But regardless of their enormous wealth, how does such a tiny group of people succeed in pulling the wool over the eyes of the majority of the American population? And how did they turn what was once a free country into a totalitarian police state in just a few decades? Well, first, they need to scare the hell out of you. In August of 1990, Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein ordered his armies to invade the nation of Kuwait. Kuwait had been slant drilling into Iraq's oil reserves and stealing oil revenues for nearly a decade, robbing Iraq of conservatively tens of billions of dollars. Long before taking the action to invade, Saddam Hussein succeeded in getting a United Nations resolution which ordered the Kuwaitis to terminate all slant drilling operations and make financial amends with Iraq. However, this resolution was never enforced. The lifelong friend of the Kuwaiti power brokers, George H.W. Bush, sat in the White House, and without U.S. support, a United Nations resolution was just about worthless. In the end, Saddam instructed his troops to invade Kuwait and loot the banks, gold depositories, palaces, and art museums in order to recover what was owed to him. Whether Saddam was justified in invading a small, helpless country is certainly debatable. Most Americans had never heard of Saddam Hussein in 1990, and the American people had no interest in the faraway conflict and could not imagine going to war over it. The Iraqi army may have been looting Kuwait, but there were no reports of significant hostilities with the Kuwaiti citizens. All that changed when President George H.W. Bush called for a special session of Congress and gave a fear-mongering speech to the American people.
A powerful Iraqi army invaded its trusting and much weaker neighbor, Kuwait. Within 3 days, 120,000 Iraqi troops with 850 tanks had poured into Kuwait and moved south to threaten Saudi Arabia. Our objectives in the Persian Gulf are clear, our goals defined and familiar. Iraq must withdraw from Kuwait completely, immediately, and without condition.
The speech was well received, but most of the American people still disapproved of U.S. military intervention. But Bush didn't quit.
Less than a week ago, in the early morning hours of August 2nd,
Iraqi armed forces, without provocation or warning, invaded a peaceful Kuwait. Iraq's tanks stormed in blitzkrieg fashion through Kuwait in a few short hours. With more than 100,000 troops, along with tanks, artillery, and surface-to-surface missiles, Iraq now occupies Kuwait. As was the case in the 1930s, we see in Saddam Hussein an aggressive dictator threatening his neighbors.
Bush pressed on with a speech to the United Nations.
Iraq and its leaders must be held liable for these crimes of abuse and destruction.
But the majority of the American people were still not interested in going to war. So the power brokers needed to scare them and get them really upset.
And we finally call on Naira to testify.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Naira, and I just came out of Kuwait. What I saw happen to the children of Kuwait and to my country has changed my life forever. It has changed the life of all Kuwaitis, young and old. We are children no more. The second week after the invasion, I volunteered at the Al-Adan hospital with 12 other women who wanted to help as well. I was the youngest volunteer. The other women were from 20 to 30 years old. While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying.
Horrifying? Perhaps. Only it was a total lie. Although she put on a commendable performance, Nurse Naira turned out to be the daughter of Bush's hand-picked Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. There is not a single documented case of Saddam's soldiers entering any Kuwaiti hospital. But dying babies lying on the floor tug at the heartstrings, don't they?
The Iraqis were making fun of President Bush and verbally and physically abusing my family and me on our way out of Kuwait.
And if the viewers weren't upset enough already, let's insult their leader. After this footage aired, most Americans were suddenly ready to go to war.
And I know my co-chairman, Tom Lantos, will join me in telling you that we have never heard, in all this time, in all circumstances, a record of inhumanity and brutality and sadism as the ones that the witnesses have given us today.
Oh, really? Even the lies told by these now discredited so-called eyewitnesses paled in comparison to the real-life atrocities of Stalin, Hitler, and Mao Zedong. Either this idiot slept through history class, or he was just adding to the fear-mongering atmosphere. Whichever it was, the performance of Naira paved the way for 1991's Operation Desert Storm.
Don't you know we got smart bombs? It's a good thing that our bombs are clever. Don't you know that the smart bombs are so clever? They only kill bad people now. Don't you know though our kids are dumb, we got smart bombs. What a joyous thing now. Here we go, so let's drink and toast to those clever bombs and the men who built them. There they go now. There go all my friends. There they go now, marching off to war again, smiling proudly with their heads in the clouds.